Welcome to the Tools for Talking with Fellow Scientists Reflective Skills for Uncertain Times webinar. Put on partly by the Science Trust Project, and there are a lot of us involved. These are just a few of the people who are involved, though I am primarily the person speaking today. Don't take that to mean that I'm the person behind it. There are lots of people, and I see some of you in the chat even now. So lots of people. It's a collaborative effort. The American Physical Society hosts the Science Trust Project. If you're not familiar with us, we aim to promote trustworthy, responsible, and humane relationships between individuals, science, and society, and to equip physicists with the skills necessary to address issues of trust and misinformation about science. The Science Trust Project exists with other APS public engagement efforts because APS members saw a particular need and demanded action toward working toward solving problems around trust and misinformation. So we help scientist publics interface with non-scientist publics. That being said, a lot of the work we do and the skills that we build are equally viable and useful within the scientific community, which is what we're going to be talking about it with today. I'm not going to derive what we're doing today from first principles, and we can't cover every edge case. So in that vein, I'm just going to start somewhere in the hand-wavy middle. I realize that for many of you, that may not be sufficient for your curiosity. And to those, I say three things. First, it shouldn't. Good job on the impulse for peer review. 100%, I invite you to look into this more. I don't claim that this is the end-all be-all. I only claim that it is one necessary and important piece of the puzzle in addressing issues of trust and misinformation and the broader science landscape. Second, you can't really actively listen by passively hearing webinars, podcasts, or books. Not that there's anything wrong with those. It's just that there's only so much you can do to solve big problems by sitting in webinars. Changes of state require work. And third, accordingly, at the end of this, I'll invite you to sign up for a relevant mailing list and to send you some resources that may be useful to some of you. So we're going to talk about reflective listening today. It's useful in many places, and it's a transferable skill, which is why we're presenting it here in this format for talking amongst ourselves. For many of you, this may be review, even probably review, and for others it may not. And it's important, which is why we're reviewing it. What do I mean by reflection? I mean at least two things. One, holding up a conversational mirror for purposes of clarification, understanding, and holding a working relationship. Think of it, it's almost a way to gather data when you're in a conversation. And two, introspectively self-assessing, a kind of metacognition. Conversation is a partnership. It's not about convincing people of something. It's about holding conversation and good faith dialogue in a hopefully more skillful, deliberate, and productive way. In a sense, it's both introspective and inward facing as much as it is outward facing. So if there is disagreement, it's not necessarily about getting one person to change their minds and the other not. And I'm also not talking about compromise either. It's about taking the thesis and the antithesis and cooperatively enlisting the help of both people to reach a better synthesis. So listening, is the way we're using it today, is not the same thing as hearing. It's an active process. At a fundamental level, reflective listening is the skill of listening to understand the experience of the talker by reflecting guesses about the talker's meaning. It's a two-step process. First, the listener seeks to understand where a talker is coming from. Then, the listener recites the thought back to the talker to confirm that the thought has been understood correctly, usually rephrased or with more context. Now, that may sound simple, but doing it well can be very difficult. It takes practice, deliberate practice. And it has to come from the right place internally. Also note that there are multiple ways to know things. For example, knowing about homelessness intellectually would be a very different way of knowing than would actually being unhoused. And there are multiple channels for listening and communication that can be useful to account for, as I hope you'll see in a short while. I need to be clear that the actual practice of reflective listening is not just a trick to give you something to say to fill the air in a difficult conversation and just do what you wanted to anyway. That's not what it is. Also, don't mistake it as just one simple trick to make everyone agree with you. That's not it either. It goes deeper than that. Furthermore, as listening is a useful skill for everyone to develop, it's even more important to listen skillfully and with the right heart set and mindset if you're in a position of leadership, of a class, of a lab, of a department, of a kickball league. And as you'll see later, it can be really easy to think you're listening and not actually be listening. It can also be easy to think you have information that someone else needs, when you also just as much need the information that they have to offer. Whatever role you play in the conversation, whether you lead from the front or whether you lead from behind, if what you're doing doesn't have an underlying spirit of, at the very least, partnership, accurate empathy, intellectual humility, acceptance, compassion, evocation, and curiosity, it's not reflective listening. And I should also say that this is only one piece of a larger puzzle. I think listening is important. It's also true that it's not the only component that's important. I also want to acknowledge the contexts that I'm speaking in today. We know that at all levels, colleagues in the science community, in the US in particular, are having some stressful and even tense discussions right now about the future. Like, what might be a good path forward? What does effective action look like? What should we prioritize? What do we value? And many other unsavory and difficult topics and discussions. I'm here offering an open acknowledgement that budgets, funding, international collaborations, visas, and so on likely form many of the conversations that are happening in the hallways these days. This, what we're showing today, is applicable in these different circumstances. The skills I aim to present today do not advocate for a specific destination or even any specific path, though they do recognize that we are all hiking together in a wilderness. Some of us may wish to stop here or there. Some of us may wish to go further. Some may choose this loop or that turnpike. And at the same time, we're all trying to navigate difficult terrain. I'm not offering a map through the wilderness. We, together, are collectively faced with the tasks of simultaneously traversing, surveying, surviving in, and mapping the current scientific landscape. What I am offering up today is a way to help read the terrain before us and understand why our fellows may wish to go this way or that way. This skill can help us navigate such that we don't lose each other, break an ankle, or hike into foreseeable swamps. This tool is not an end in and of itself. It is a skill I hope you can use to help yourself and to help others. I'll give a specific walkthrough in a moment, but in the meantime, here is a metaphorical example where you can substitute your own issue in for whatever the nail is in this example. It could be a funding disagreement, maybe a questioner mad at you during your poster session, someone's making smelly fish in the break room, whatever your nail is, you can insert that into this metaphor. This example is modeled on a short skit about a woman with a nail in her head, and a man is trying to listen to her. It starts off with the woman telling the man what she is experiencing from her perspective. She says, I just can't figure it out. It's like there's all this relentless pressure in my head. All my shirts have holes in them. I'm not getting good sleep. I'm anxious all the time. I'm scared. It's not going to stop. It's affecting my relationships in a terrible way. It's relentless and scary and tiring. And she continues. Eventually, the frustrated man says, well, you do have a nail in your head. And she responds to his frustration with, you always do this. You're not listening. This is not about the nail. Now, note that how she responds tells us something. It tells us that she already knows about the nail, and she's telling us that there's more to the story, and he isn't necessarily picking that up from that comment. And to her frustration, again, he's not picking it up. What she's trying to say, or at the very least, isn't engaging with her in that process. So here are some examples of what is not good listening that we might be tempted to say. Stop complaining and do something about the nail. Like ordering. If you don't fix it, you're going to get fired. Warning. If I were you, I'd take the nail out. Advising. Your shirts have holes in them because they keep getting caught on the nail in your forehead. Teaching. You obviously don't want my help. Judging. You have a serious injury and you're in denial about it. That might be labeling. I hear you. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Reassuring and dismissing. Why don't you want to talk about the nail? Questioning. Now, I'm not saying these can't ever be part of a conversation. I am saying that they aren't usually good listening when you're trying to be part of a listening participant of a conversation. They tend to remove, invalidate, ignore, or threaten the speaker's autonomy, and so might even be considered roadblocks to listening. And if, like me, you come from academia or ever did some teaching, we may have gotten in the habit of being in that role of teaching or educating. So if what you're trying to do is listen, resist that writing reflex, resist the fixing reflex. Sometimes it's just not the time to inform or lecture. It can be useful to learn when to discern when those times are, because sometimes listening can be about gathering data. And then why don't you just? Well, just makes it sound easy, like maybe the other person's unintelligent for having not thought about it or lazy. If it were that easy and obvious, it would likely have already been done by the person. So if you think, why don't you just, then be prepared to ask it honestly, because there's likely a reason that you need more information about. So approach it with curiosity in that case. So this part of our toolkit has to do with intentional intellectual humility. So, for example, maybe the spike in her head, or excuse me, maybe the spike in her back is causing the holes rather than the spike in her head, and neither of them can see it. Maybe it's not actually about the nail. Maybe she's trying to bring up to him that he's washing his rock collection in the laundry machine at 3 o'clock in the morning, and she's trying to bring it up to him in a way that is maybe a bit more approachable, but he's not picking that up. That's another reason why she might have holes in her clothing. She already knows about the nail. And also, maybe she shouldn't take the nail out. If you ask a first responder, first aid books, what you'll see is if she is this coherent in talking with this big nail in her head, removing it could do more damage than leaving it in. There may be a good reason why it has been left in. We don't know that from the context of that short snippet of the conversation. So approaching with intentional intellectual humility, which pairs well with curiosity, can help elicit some of those other things, those whys. How did you come to this decision? Rather than, you're just doing the wrong thing, you're believing the wrong thing. The how did you get here, the derivation, can be important and less off-putting. So I'm getting ready to illustrate how a few of these tools for talking could have made a big difference in an interaction from my personal life, personal, professional life. So things like affirmations, affect labeling, reflections, open-ended questions, and this deliberate intellectual humility, or resisting that fixing reflex. We've all been in situations where we said or did something rash, where we froze up or otherwise acted in a way that we regretted later after the heat of the moment or the panic wore off. Sometimes, after we were able to look back and assess, we might choose to tell ourselves to act differently once we've reflected. For our purposes today, it's this feeling, if that's even the proper term for it, that I want to highlight, since even though scientists may be usually stressed, or probably feeling especially stressed and threatened these days. This physical state of heightened stress, the pumping adrenaline, the myriad of associated possible emotions, is the starting point. You may have heard it go by several names: the threat response, fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, hyperarousal, or acute stress response. I wanted to gesture how this skill, reflective listening, is grounded in real physiological changes. So you know it's real and not just stuff pulled out of the ether. That being said, just be aware that I'm not a biologist. My formal training is in physics. And at the very least, I'm almost certainly oversimplifying. I want to unpack that hyperarousal stress response a bit. So I begin with that unpleasant, familiar feeling. The feeling you might get at the airport when TSA asks you to please step aside, when you get carded at the bar, when you see flashing blue lights, or get called on in class and don't know the answer, when someone cuts you off in traffic, when you feel eyes on you at night and you don't know where they are, or when you find out that your grant may be suspended. I'm going to walk you through, again, a real example of a stressful conversation that went quickly wrong, and give commentary and reflection on how reflective listening could have led to a much better outcome for both participants. So let me set the scene. It's the spring semester of 2020, and I'm teaching at a community college. It's been a semester of chaos. But luckily, the administration has sent word that we can, and perhaps even should, issue a grade of incomplete for all students who wish it, or who could be provided with the opportunity to make up for missed work for a better grade or a passing grade if they had been failing. This was in the height of COVID. And I relay all of this to my classes a week or so before final exams that they would have until the end of the next semester to make stuff up if they had so chosen, and give them the choice that the administration alerted us that they have. And I explained the situation. So there I am in my office, halfway through entering final grades, when my phone rings. I say, "Hello, XYZ Community College, Zach Pruitt speaking. How can I?" And I get interrupted. Now, I already don't like the phone, so I am tired and stressed and rushed. Final grades need to be in that day. I'm annoyed at the phone. It's just, you know the feeling if you've either been on the one side or the other or both. You know the feeling. What I hear coming from the other side is, I'm not gonna yell because it'll overload my mic, but it was could be classified as yelling. In retrospect, I probably could have interpreted it as urgence and panic. but it sounded to me in the time as yelling, angrily yelling. This is so-and-so from your such and such class. Why did you give me an incomplete? It showed I was passing this morning. Change it back. He's obviously panicked. He's put off, angry. He feels threatened, confused, and stressed. So here is where one of the skills that we're talking about today could have been useful. I wish that I had known to, for example, offer an affirmation and say something like, hey, it's good to hear from you. I'm glad you called. There are other things I could have said, but as an example, that's one thing that I could have said. I didn't say that. I'll return to the didn't say it path in a moment. I want to delve into the affirmations in just a moment, or for a moment. So, affirmations. It would be nice if we had a way to build rapport, lower threat perception, make it feel safe to share more information and not be on the attack or on the defensive. Build a space that's safe to be vulnerable enough to hold a working relationship. Recognize autonomy. Demonstrate your goodwill and acceptance of the other person. And acceptance doesn't necessarily mean agreement. Relaxes the conversation. Show that you're on their side. Show that we value them and their presence, both, for example, here in class or in this moment. Model that we're looking for something right that they're doing rather than nitpicking what they're doing wrong. And it models cooperation. There are many other benefits here. And when used genuinely and not in a hollow, patronizing way, this is what affirmations do, or they can do. And by the term affirmation, I almost mean validation, but that's still not quite the right word. It's kind of a technical term is the way that I'm using it. So I'm also going to say, I think it might be helpful to show also specifically what I don't mean by affirmation before offering a little bit better definition. So note that I'm not saying that all of these are bad. I'm just trying to clarify my use of the term affirmation as I'm using it here. I don't mean praise or agreement or flattery. I don't mean thanking or a self-affirmation. I don't mean catcalling. And it's not usually about something that the other person can't control, like their looks. So what do I mean? Well, affirmations are genuinely held statements or observations that you have about appreciating, acknowledging, valuing the other person in their words. It could come in several forms. You could have a simple affirmation be, for example, a statement that appreciatively acknowledges something that a person said or did. A more complex affirmation might be a statement that appreciatively acknowledges to a person an enduring strength or an attitude or a value, something that they care about from what they have told you, something that's important to them that you recognize, yes, this is something that's important. It's an asset about themselves that they value rather than a deficit. Some examples might be you're talking to somebody, it doesn't have to just be a scientist, but it could be a scientist. Somebody says, anything nuclear is dangerous. I don't want radioactive waste straight piped into the river that I drink from. Do you? You might respond, you deeply care about the environment and the long-term health of the community, don't you? Or another example, oh my gosh, you're a physicist. I bet you know all about quantum mechanics. I just love my quantum amethyst crystal. The world would be so much less toxic and disconnected and lonely if people could just feel the energy of the universe flowing through them like I do when I wear mine. You put a lot of effort to seek the joy in life. And that's a rare quality in people these days. And I also could have approached my own internal thought process a little more skillfully than I did. And by that, I mean, I could have used what I'm going to call affect labeling. According to one 2018 article called Putting Feelings into Words, affect labeling as implicit emotional regulation, affect labeling basically means putting feelings into words. It is an implicit emotional regulation strategy. It can reduce the conscious negative experience that you're having and the physical response as well, and help manage the behavior from those emotions that are happening in the moment. In this case, I might have noticed my internal state. I'm being yelled at, or I feel like I'm being yelled at. Observe how and what I feel, and then mentally acknowledge it, because then that takes it away from my lizard brain, the amygdala back here, up into the prefrontal cortex, where I can more think through things and move it from lizard to, we're going to try to make a safe space for a real discussion, a container to hold a discussion. So after being caught surprised and confused a little bit, I was kind of panicked. I could have labeled it as such and decided to be affirming. If I had been affirming, I expect that it might have started cooling the conversation from the get-go. I could have been, he sees something as urgent, and I could have interpreted what I heard then as yelling as urgence. He's got a loud signal he's trying to convey to me, something that's important enough to raise the gain on that signal. And I could have said, I feel tired and stressed. I'm also confused and surprised. Now, this would be happening internally in me. I wouldn't be saying this over the phone to him. Maybe I might think, he's mad about something and I am confused why. This needs to be a safe space for talking if I'm going to be able to help him and help myself resolve the situation. Sorry, I hit the space bar. My apologies. I want him to know how much I value him in class. So I could have then said, hey, it's good to hear from you. I'm glad you called. And that's not what I did. At this point in the interaction, I think the issue is in the moment. I think the issue at that point is him not understanding the difference between what an incomplete means and what a fail means. So I think that he has seen in the learning management system, Moodle, that he sees incomplete put in, because that was the default, and he's confusing it for a failure. That's what I think it is. But as you'll see, that wasn't the issue, and I get stuck there because I wasn't listening. So I hear, I'm angry that you changed my grade, even though you were trying to help me. I'm blaming you for trying to help. So I'm frustrated, I feel attacked and confused and surprised, and I'm already tired because I was grading late that night. Wow, why am I being yelled at? He must not have seen the email, or maybe he wasn't paying attention in class when I talked about this. So I better let him know what was in the email. There's another thing that the fixing reflex emerges. So what I actually say is something like, did you read my most recent email? When I didn't hear back, I was thinking that, and I get cut off. So he doesn't hear the rest of what I was saying. He hears, you didn't read the email. He thinks, you don't deserve financial aid. He hears maybe elitism, or I come across as holier than thou or haughty. He feels now livid rather than just panicked, put off, angry, threatened, confused, stressed, and betrayed by somebody who, we had a good relationship in class before this. He was a pretty good student. He thinks, I have to keep my financial aid or I'll be homeless again. This is a threat I need to address now. So then the urgency goes up. The adrenaline kicks in again. So as it turns out, this is a parenthetical, he couldn't take an incomplete because his financial aid, he had to show the bank that day that he had a passing grade. I didn't know this because I wasn't listening. I thought that the issue was a difference in understanding of the terminology, but it was really a difference in understanding of the problem. I thought he doesn't need to have a D-. He's a good student. He's at least a B student. He can make up the stuff that he'd missed in the last week and everything be fine. But no, he had to have the D-, otherwise he would lose his financial aid and then lose his housing. So he says, no, you weren't thinking. I was passing this morning. Why did you change it? Change it back. I have a grade for every assignment. You can't just change it like that. Change my grade back. Now, here's another thing, another one of these tools for talking, that what I wish I had known to do was offer a reflection of meaning, reflect back to him for both of our sakes what I think he's saying. So I might say, you want me to change your grade back to a D. It's important to you that you get a D, and it's absolutely up to you. So that's reflecting the meaning that I'm hearing as I understand it. It's also another type of affirmation. It's affirming his autonomy. So it's reducing the threat. And I'm reflecting for my own, I would need to process the adrenaline, because by this point, if I had done things better, realized I've got lots of adrenaline, I need to watch what's happening with that. And I didn't say that. So let's talk about reflections for a moment. Reflections are when you are holding up a mirror. You're not standing in the way of the mirror. You're not getting in the reflection. You're just holding up a mirror, reflecting back so that they can hear what they have said, and so that you can hear what they have said through you saying it. It can be useful. This can be done multiple ways, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And it can also help to shine a conversational selective light on the parts of the conversation that we want to perceive better. And by the way, affect labeling can be a form of doing this both internally and externally when done well. Reflective statements, it's a statement made by a listener that is intended to mirror or reflect, either explicit or implicit, the meaning of the talker's preceding speech. So, for example, what I mean is you're loaning them a bit of your brain so that, one, they can reflect on their own thoughts, so that they can hear their own thoughts, and so that you can be more confident that you understand more properly and fully what they're saying. Again, lots of different types of ways to do this, and I can't give them the full treatment that I need to today just for the sake of time, but a couple of the flavors might be a simple reflection that contains little or no additional content or context beyond what the talker has said. It could be a little bit more complex. Maybe a reflection that adds additional or different meaning beyond what the talker has said, not you adding your meaning to it. It's a guess at to what they might have meant as the next thing they would have said, to see if you're tracking, almost like a linear regression. Here's the data I have. Let me see if I'm following. You could use a metaphor, either a metaphor that, for you, it's almost like, or sometimes they'll give you a metaphor and you can run with that metaphor as long as it's useful. It uses descriptive language to paint a picture for the person. You could continue the paragraph where you're offering what might be the next as yet unspoken thing that they're saying. You could use emotional awareness, where you're paying attention to, acknowledging, and affirming the underlying emotion between the words, rather than focusing on the text of the words. It's the subtext of the words. Or maybe focusing on other channels rather than just either written text or auditory. You're paying attention to body language, or to the tone, or to the facial expressions. There are other channels for communication. Or you could summarize. This normally happens near either the end of a conversation or when you're transitioning from one part of a conversation to another. It's where the listener sifts through what the talker has said so far and offers back what they think the core message of the talker is. What should I get out of this past 15 minutes? What they see as the highlights of that part of the conversation, often used as a transition. Reflections benefit both parties here. Both of us felt threatened, and reflections could have helped both of us. Sometimes saying more isn't optimal. We know he would have cut me off because he did. So especially early on, I needed to reflect to de-escalate so that I could listen to his concerns rather than bringing my assumed concerns in first, when he was physiologically incapable of hearing it. So in that case, the shorter rather than a long explanation would have suited the purpose much better. And then Two, I needed to reflect again because we're all human. I was also pumped up with adrenaline. Someone was yelling at me. So, or I felt like they were. I also needed time to process this, to metabolize the adrenaline, to figure out what's going on, to manage my internals. Now, I can't control him, but I can control me and try to establish safety in the conversation from that perspective. Would it have been better if both of us had gone in to reflect calmly and to de-escalate? Sure. But I can only be responsible for the quality of the conversation that I have from my part, not the outcome from his part. And it's a partnership. It's a dance, and I was not being a graceful dance partner. So that's not what I did. That's not how I thought. What I hear is, why did you change my grade? So I think, he must not understand why I changed his grade. So I'm still feeling confused and attacked. And I think, I better let him know that there's an opportunity here before he blows up even more at me, before this escalates. And you can see the problem there. So I say, I didn't hear back. I assumed you. If I'd gone that route rather than offering information, it may have conveyed to him that I was receiving his signal and was getting what he was saying, that he didn't need to turn the gain up anymore. And we could have moved to the next productive point collaboratively, especially through several such reflections, establishing a container to hold the conversation safely. It takes some amount of vulnerability to have conversations like this. And I could have learned what was going on. Again, that's not what I did. And so his signal gets louder because he thinks I'm not hearing, because I'm not hearing. So he hears, you have no say in this. He hears a removal of autonomy. He feels coerced and threatened and defensive, even more urgent than he did before. It's escalating. He thinks maybe he knows I did the work, so something else must be wrong. Is this some kind of threat or coercion? Maybe there's some other motive here. I don't know. So then he says, try to get me to understand again. You won't do this. And he's yelling, you won't do this to me. This is not fair, and you know it. It's elitist and misconduct. He continued, but that's the gist of this part of it for now. So what I wish I had said was something wise, like, do you hear me? I wish I'd said something wise, like, doing this would have given him the floor and the chance to get his message out. He obviously knew it to be important. And it would have given us both time to process. Silence can be reflective. It's not just awkward silence. Silence, we can decide. This is a reflective silence. I am ceding the floor for a moment so that this person can get their thought out. It's important to them that they get their thought out. There's no rule that says we must fill silence. Or I could have said something like, you're angry at me for changing your grade and worried about failing. Something like this could have reflected my understanding of how he felt, establishing almost a kind of a dial tone, if you've ever interacted with a landline with a dial tone. By affect labeling, I could have let him know what I was hearing from him. And if it wasn't right, he could have corrected it. I could have validated his emotions in a way that wasn't patronizing or me taking the floor or being judgy or even agreeing with his perspective. It would just convey my understanding of his perspective. That's what empathy is, which might help fix part of the original problem, which again was me not hearing him. Now, regardless of whether my original assumption about whether he was confused was right or not, In this instant, it wouldn't have mattered because I couldn't make him listen to me, and could still have modeled and cultivated a conversational environment where that would be more likely to happen by managing my half of the interaction. Both of these could have affirmed autonomy, and again, that's not what I did. So what we're seeing here is both parties have an important message that we're trying to transmit at the same time. We're operating under a transmission model of communication. We're speaking past each other, basically. Without some mechanism for error correction, the message sent by the person you're talking with and your message can quickly become garbled or lost or misunderstood. What do I mean here by a message? A message is the meaning contained in the signal or signals that we're trying to communicate. Many channels exist, such as verbal, body language, facial expressions, inflections, text, etc. And there are many types of noise here, both internal noise that can get in the way of communication and external noise. Here are some examples, just a few examples. So semantic noise is when different connotations and different definitions of words and grammar and understandings of the problem are getting in the way of the message. So his understanding of problem versus my understanding of the problem was very different. I thought that again, the problem was he's mad because he thinks an incomplete means I'm assigning a failure. So I got to explain to him that's not the case. But that wasn't the issue. From his understanding of the problem was I cannot receive anything except a passing grade today. I can't take a B in a week because he'd lose his housing. Another type, physiological noise. So these are other signals that get in the way of both hearing and taking your internal, what I want to get across, and it coming in. Does it come out wrong sometimes? Other things that gets in the way, things like being stressed, having adrenaline, being distracted, tired, hungry, an elevated heart rate, being lightheaded or out of breath are all examples of that. Physiological noise might be, psychological noise, excuse me, might be mood or assumptions or emotions or biases, preconceptions coming in that get in the way of communication. So at this point in the action, we're both trying to boost the signal. We're yelling at each other. We're going back to the same points again and again and again because we're repeating, because we're not thinking that it's getting across. We're repeating ourselves. Or we interrupt because what we have to say is urgent and important and takes priority, etc. But that's no good, can create more noise. For example, in the case of what we've talked about this whole time, the more adrenaline or the feeling less safe in the conversation, being frustrated in the conversation. It increases the threat perception. It lowers how safe people feel to talk with you. It escalates things, and it makes them feel more vulnerable and guarded and removes the assumption of goodwill. Now, don't hear what I didn't say here. I'm not saying the signal doesn't matter. I'm not saying your signal doesn't matter. I'm saying that if everyone is broadcasting at the same time with a metaphorical 20,000 kilowatt antenna, people's feelings are going to start rattling. Things are going to heat up. And the whole communication spectrum will become unusable for anyone. So if more adrenaline going into this survival mode isn't helping the situation, how might we get the situation under control, both in ourselves and maybe aiding the process, greasing the wheels of helping the other person regain control of the situation maybe through creating safety and reducing threats so that we can proceed and have an actual dialogue. Again, it's not necessarily compromise, not meeting in the middle. We have a thesis and an antithesis. We need a thesis or a synthesis, something that steel isn't 50% iron and 50% carbon. It's like 98% iron and 2% carbon or whatever it is. So it's not meet in the middle. It's we got to actually work the problem. It's not you to blame for this. It's what are the causes of this happening? I digress. So in yourself, how have you accomplished this in the past? Well, maybe if you follow Elmo, belly breathing or counting to 10, it can help. Maybe talking to yourself. There are many ways. I'm not going to go over really many of them today, but there are lots of ways you can look into. The idea here is that a more optimal option might involve de-escalation. Specifically, I mean, the physical response to the action now is no longer being caused by adrenaline, is no longer being caused by the lizard brain. We're moving it to the front of the brain. So reflective listening is one way to accomplish this. So reflecting, so reestablishing that homeostasis, feeling more safe, less threatened, and able to actually process rather than acting rashly. So what could we do other than boosting the signal? Well, we could correct the errors in the signal. We could minimize signal attenuation, minimize the noise. This seems to be more workable. In reflective listening, it's like the active noise canceling in the metaphorical sense on our part. So in this interaction, I couldn't have controlled the physical space, like him being on a factory floor with his boss yelling at him because he was on the phone. I couldn't control the phone line that was a subpar phone line, but maybe I could have controlled other aspects of the noise. I could have reduced threat perception through affirmation of autonomy. I could have reduced the physiological noise or the psychological noise by either having no jargon, less jargon, reduce the semantic noise by affect labeling, or any of these other things that we've been talking about. So this is the alternative. Consider this alternative. Some examples of which we've reflected as alternative conversational paths could have helped both him and me. With accurate empathy and a thoughtful feedback mechanism, such as with reflective listening, we strive to talk with people, connect with them on equal footing rather than just to correct them or to offer information, so that we could reach a better understanding of what they are meaning and may even build rapport. And this way we can more effectively engage with each other. Even if they aren't experts in your particular research area, they are experts in what they value, what they think, and what they believe, which we aren't because we're not them. And this is vital information for us to have if we're going to have a productive conversation. How they get from values to what they're professing. You're not trying to change someone's necessarily values. You're trying to figure out what they are and how they got there, because that's going to feel a lot less threatening. I should note that this will not work if you're not trying to do it coming from the right place. It won't work if you're doing it just to control or to sell people something, or are only doing it to try to get what you want or to fill airtime. People are smart, they will pick up on it. And it won't work unless you're actually interested in them and their needs and helping. As teachers, professors, scientists, many of us are here to try to help students or the world or our field. Never be so sure about what you want that you aren't open to something better. And that's not what I did, so we continued. I hear, "You're exploiting me, inflate my grade or else." I think, what the heck is happening? Is he going to come to campus and kill me, or is he going to complain or rate my professor? I'm trying to help him. What the heck? Ah! So I cut him off. I say, you keep cutting me off, friend. I'm trying to explain. If you'll just listen to. And then he cuts me off. He hears, shut up, friend, which is taken very differently than how I intended it. I had intended it to be de-escalating, but how he heard it in the context was very escalatory. So he feels belittled, threatened, dismissed, patronized. Yet he thinks, yep, he's on a power trip. I'm not going to be intimidated. So he says, no, you listen to me. I need my financial aid. An incomplete takes it away. What you are doing is professional malpractice and cruel. And he continues. Now, I want to talk briefly about open questions, because if I had approached this conversation more skillfully, taking the better path in all of these, now might be a good time to do that, open questions. I have the little, I'm gesturing like you can see it. I have the little exclamation caution point on both sides this time, because how it played out now is, I don't think an open question would be useful, but I think if I had gone the better route, they can be useful if I had established a working relationship in this interaction. So what are open-ended questions? Open-ended questions, unlike closed-ended questions, which ask for a yes or no answer, basically, are questions that offer the talker an opportunity to think and broad choice and latitude in how to respond. They're calibrated to not back someone into a corner, calibrated to gather information. Usually more desirable for that purpose than closed-ended questions. Think here of free response questions, the who, what, when, where, and how questions. So rather than should we offer pass-fail grades, you might say, what do you think about the pass-fail grade option? Or how can we increase the graduate enrollment numbers for the department? How can we make the clean room more user-friendly? Similarly, it can also help shift from arguing about what you know or what you think. Is it rabbit season or is it duck season? That back and forth to how you know whether it's rabbit season or duck season. And talking about that can be much more informative and much more productive. Focusing on how people know something may also be perceived as less threatening and can aid in your own understanding of how they think and what they value. And it can also shift from blame, where people feel under attack, to contribution, more collaborative, equally trying to solve the problem, because contributions can come from anywhere rather than blame, you're to blame. Contributions can help solve the problem more generally. And it helps save face, and it helps make changes easier when there's not a huge social cost to doing so. So if someone changes their mind, make it safe to do so. Don't say, you should have done that weeks ago, or I knew I was right. That raises the social cost, and they're less likely to do it again. So at the end here, I'm still not getting it. I think, I'm going to take away your job if you don't give me a better grade. So I'm incomplete, trying to help you if you'll calm down. And you can see where this goes. By the end, internally, we're both not in a great place. So I end up, okay, let me know if it doesn't change within the hour. I call the registrar, and then he slams down the phone. And I feel numb and nauseated, like I want to curl up in a ball and cry, like I want to run away into the woods and never be seen again. I started with hearing the phone ringing in my ears. Now I've got a different ringing in my ears. What are some of the emotions that you heard here? Fear, terror, powerlessness, anger, being threatened, betrayal, humiliation, being violation, guilt, surprise, loss of control. Who am I talking about, him or me? That's kind of the point. Whatever the case, it was intense, and there was a lot of it. And it was present for both people. In the preceding example, both he and I had entered that extreme threat response state and weren't thinking. And you can see traces of the classic fight, flight, freeze, fawn reactions as you read it and as I lived it. I was trembling for a week and couldn't sleep for a week afterwards. I was ruminating about it because I genuinely cared about my students. I felt violated by the interaction and misunderstood and frustrated. And the thing is, so did he. He came in from a spiral and caught me off guard, and neither of us felt safe in the interaction, so we both felt like we had to defend ourselves. You can see his fight tendency, especially strongly here. And I didn't include it, but at various other times, he was also begging and pleading and going through other aspects of this response. And still didn't hear what I was trying to say because he was in no state to hear it. And then you see my fawn response here, calling him friend, but again, that being misunderstood and came across as patronizing, escalating things when I had intended it to be de-escalating. And then you see at the end where I freeze up and roll over, ultimately basically running away from the conversation as I acquiesce to his demand. Now, because it was cascading and I was not trained for this type of interaction, it quickly reached a kind of supercriticality. And unfortunately, there were no moderating influences that could prevent the whole thing from becoming a meltdown. Without better listening and conversational skills, we were both tickling the dragon's tail, as it were. The whole thing kept snowballing and we both got burned. So when this happens, how can we put the brakes on the system so we can act more logically or in a strategic goal-oriented manner? This presentation tried to highlight a couple of aspects for one tool for talking, and I am cognizant of the time, for one tool for talking where we reflectively listen, both for the benefit of ourselves and others. Knowing that you are likely to have that adrenaline in the fight, flight, or freeze response and recognizing it and labeling it as it is happening internally is something that you expect, and then reflecting on it as it's happening can also be empowering in that it can be an internal braking mechanism, a moderating force in its own right, creating safety, allowing for the adrenaline to metabolize, and cooling the room. Reflecting meaning ensures that people feel heard, in control, and safer, as well as providing valuable information to us so that we can have more productive dialogue. I'm very near the end. But I don't have time for this, or it doesn't work, we often hear people say. Well, it's not a magic wand, but it's better than the alternatives. Something you often hear about the scientific method. It's self-correcting. It's not perfect, but it's the best we've got. It's better than the alternatives. You don't have time to waste not doing this. That would be my argument. 5 extra minutes in this conversation could have saved me weeks of sleepless nights, months of rumination, and trouble for both him and for my department. And then the information deficit model doesn't work for other people. Why would it work for us internally? And start small. Start big and it'll be obvious and people will feel manipulated. It's a skill you have to practice and practice with coming from the right place. And conversations happen in phases. You have to engage and build a working relationship around mutual trust before you can do much else. So consider what your nail is, what it was. Think back to a conversation and fill in this phrase for yourself. In the next week, I will practice reflective listening when I, and fill in the blank. Feel free if you would like, post it in the comments. In the next week, I will practice reflective listening when I, for review, we have talked about open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, affect labeling, signal to noise ratio, and roadblocks to listening. Reflective listening well is a great way to improve and maintain internal science communication. And the root of the tree here is the spirit of the whole thing. You know how saying things again is it's a signal boosting? I've said that several times intentionally, and I'm ending with it here intentionally. Technical proficiency is great. Technical proficiency with skills won't work with this if it's not coming from the right place. So with that, if you would like more information, here is the Science Trust Project mailing list QR code. I think maybe Meg or Allie will post it in the comments. Here are some books that I think might be useful to you. And just for the sake of the recording, I'm going to go to the next slide just so that we can have, here's those references on the slides that we used. I'm going to hand it back over to Meg. Thank you all.